Okay, so maybe you two I'll just speak to afterwards and just give you a brief overview of where we're up to and how this works. But for now, we'll focus on this. So we're on the last two lines before the Mishnah on Mem Daled and Beis. The Gemara is going on the comment of the Mishnah, in which the Mishnah says that that oil which drips out of a lamp, one can't benefit from because it's einu min hamochan, which is a code word effectively for saying it's Muktza. And on that, the Gemara brings a brisa that when you have leftover oil in a lamp or a lantern, the oil is Muktza, is osa, and Rabbi Shimon says it is mutter. Rabbi Shimon says it's allowed. So by way of introduction, I'd like to do a few things today. I want us to relearn the Mishnah, the original Mishnah on which the Gemara is going, and we'll use this as a bit of a chance for chazara. We'll just try and do one of the challenges we've faced with these really a couple daf that we've done is the Gemara bogs us down in an enormous amount of detail, and it's very easy to lose sight of the wood from the trees. So we're going to relearn the Mishnah, hopefully with all the insight that we've gained as we've learned our way through it, and then be able to go back to what the Gemara is saying over here. So this is one thing we'll do. The second thing that emerges from this short two-line Gemara is that it's the first time, or the second time, we've had laid out relatively clearly that there's a very significant machlokas in general over about Muktza, and more or less Rabbi Shimon is inclined to reduce Muktza to only relatively few cases, whereas the Tanakama Rabbi Yehuda increases Muktza to many more cases. So in principle, the Gemara sort of phrases it as Rabbi Yehuda holds there is Muktza, Rabbi Shimon holds there isn't Muktza. But when you break down to the detail, it's not as extreme as that. Meaning there are many types of Muktza that Rabbi Shimon agrees to, but nonetheless, there's a general pattern or tendency of Rabbi Shimon holding of less cases of Muktza. The third thing we're going to begin dipping our toes into is what is this statement talking about? The Tanakama who says that you're not that Mosar HaShemen SheBaNer, that the leftover oil in the light is Muktza. Osa, even more accurately, what is he talking about? What is going on over here? Is it a regular Issa Muktza or something else? And if it is Muktza, why is it Muktza? In fact, what Ner are we talking about? Are we talking about just a general light that's lighting up the house on Shabbos? Are we talking about Noah's Shabbos? What's the halachic framework behind this? And what we'll see is that there's many layers of Muktza over here. So even though this is only a two-line Gemara, it sort of summarizes there's quite a lot of layers of Muktza that's floating around over here. So what I'd like to suggest really is that we go back to Mem Beis on Beis and we relearn the Mishnah there and try and do a little bit of chazara on that Mishnah, because it's impossible to understand this Gemara without doing chazara on that Mishnah. And in the source sheets, I tried to put that there. I basically said to everyone, just go back and relearn the Mishnah. So by the way, incidentally, I'm away next week, so there will be Shiur on Sunday, but there will not be Shiur next Tuesday and the Sunday after that. But I would urge everyone to really do chazara through the whole, to bekias chazara through the last daf and a half that we've learned through daf, because the price of Eon and doing in depth, which is what we're doing, one ends up losing a bit of the feel of the flow. So you use that time for chazara, because we will be moving on from this Mishnah. Okay, so the Mishnah says, Ein noisling kli tachas haneh lekabel bos hashemen. So the first halacha of the Mishnah is that you're not allowed to put a utensil under a lamp to catch driplets of oil that are falling off the lamp. So you have a lantern burning and oil drips out. You're not allowed to put something underneath it to receive it. Why not? This is a quick for hair. Chazara. One answer is mevatel kli meichano, that the keli that receives the droplets will become Muktza, because by receiving these oil droplets, it will become Muktza, and you're not allowed to make something Muktza on Shabbos. Why are you not allowed to make something Muktza on Shabbos?
So, boner or sosa?
Either because of boner or sosa. So either because you're destroying the utensil had functionality, and when it becomes Muktza, you're removing its functionality, and therefore it's a d'Rabbanan of the melacha, one of the Lamentas melachas is not to destroy functionality. Don't dismantle a building, don't dismantle a keli. This is a form of dismantling a keli. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that since the keli, the utensil, will become muktza, it'll become unmovable. It'll become, you won't be able to budge it. And if it's a type of boina, it's like fixing something in its space. That's the second possibility. Rashi brings both those possibilities. And we saw from other Rishonim a third possibility that it's wrong to make things muktza on Shabbos because you're diminishing Onek Shabbos effectively. You're making things dysfunctional for Shabbos, and that's a diminution of Shabbos. So 3 reasons why you're not allowed to be matzah kimechonis. So that's one explanation. What's the second reason why you're not allowed, or what's another reason why you might not be allowed to put a clean vessel? Yes. So this is a fascinating reason. We think, and we've said this again and again in the Perek, we think that we come into learning Muktza thinking Muktza is like a state of being. Either something is Muktza or it's not Muktza. As you learn the halachas Muktza, we see that it's not quite that clear cut. There's Muktza with respect to A and respect to B. The concept of Muktza, we shouldn't just think about this object as Muktza, we should think about functionality. With respect to some functionalities, this is Muktza, with respect to other functionalities, it's not. So for example, there's one level of Muktza, which is called Klisha Melachta Issa. So a pen is Muktza because it's used for a malacha, for an Issa thing. A hammer is Muktza because it's used for banging nails into walls, building on Shabbos, and therefore it's Muktza. But what do you mean when you say the hammer is Muktza? More accurately, one should say since the normal use of a hammer is to do a malacha, the regular functionality of the hammer is Muktza. However, if I wish to use the hammer for a mutter functionality, for example, to crack open a coconut, it's not Muktza. So it's already strands of functionality. That's important to understand in Muktza, and it's important to understand in the second explanation the Gemara gives of this halacha, because the Gemara says even a non-Muktza keli, a bowl which is not Muktza, shouldn't be used for the sake of Muktza, because with respect to Muktza needs, even a regular bowl is Muktza. So I have a cereal bowl, not Muktza, it's a cereal bowl. I can eat cereal from it on Shabbos, but to move that cereal bowl to catch droplets of oil, which are Muktza, falling out of a lantern, that's using the non-Muktza item for a Muktza need, that's ein kli nittel. That was the second explanation of Gemara. What was the third explanation? The third reason why one shouldn't do it? And this is a half a trick question, it's a bit harder to remember. There was a third explanation. It depends how we read the first Mamza in the Gemara. It may be that this is a new Issa of Hatzalah, that you shouldn't engage in rescuing things on Shabbos, because rescue operations lead to people being boggled and harried and rushed. They lead to unnecessary tirch on Shabbos, and therefore there's a drabonon against rescue operations on Shabbos. That was a possible reading in the Gemara, so that's a third reason. Okay, so that's the first halacha in the Gemara, that you're not allowed to use a keli to catch droplets of oil. And then the Gemara says, the Mishnah. Then the Mishnah says, mutter. If you put it there from before Shabbos, it's mutter. So what on earth does that mean? I mean, if you can do anything before Shabbos, there's no hills of Shabbos before Shabbos. Why should you not be allowed to put the bowl there before Shabbos? What do you mean? It's mutter. So Rashi, and Tosfos was medayik this, and Rashi learns this literally, and says that the Mishnah means to say that there's no issa of leaving it there if you put it there before Shabbos, and the reason is because we would think that you're not allowed to leave it there before Shabbos in case you come to use the oil. So there's a Gemara elsewhere that talks about scenarios where we don't allow you to set up certain things even before Shabbos because you may come to use the oil. And therefore Rashi learns that the Chiddush of the Mishnah is that you're allowed to put something there before Shabbos, or rather, if you put something there before Shabbos, you're allowed to leave it there. Whereas Tosfos says this is a misreading, that you have to say the language of the Mishnah is lav dafka. You're allowed to put a bowl there before Shabbos. There's no issue at all. So that was a side point. Are you allowed to leave a bowl there before Shabbos? Okay. Now we get to the critical point. Then it says you're not allowed to benefit from the oil that drips out of a lamp because it's eino min hamuchen. Why are you not allowed to benefit from the oil that drips out of the lamp? So Tosfos is medayik from the language that this is a level of Muktza of you're not allowed to benefit from the oil, but you are allowed to move the oil. So this is another scenario of where we think about Muktza as too black and white. We think either something is Muktza or isn't Muktza. It's not correct. You can have something which is Muktza with respect to use and not Muktza with respect to movement. And that's how Tosfos reads the Mishnah. So again, you have a lantern with a flame burning from it. Oil spills out, drips out from the lantern. This oil is Muktza, says the Mishnah. You're not allowed to benefit from the oil which drips out of the lantern. What sort of Muktza is it? A Muktza that you're not allowed to benefit from it. You're not allowed to use it. Are you allowed to move it? Yeah, because it doesn't say, this is how Tosfos read the Mishnah. It doesn't say you're not allowed to be metaltal it, you're not allowed to move it. It says you're not allowed to benefit from it. So now Tosfos is bothered. What sort of Muktza is this that you're not allowed to benefit from it, but you are allowed to, so you're not allowed to move it, so you're allowed to move it, but you're not allowed to benefit from it. What sort of Muktza is this? So Tosfos says that there's three, this is Tosfos over Masechet Shabbat. I'm just going to summarize Tosfos outside. So Tosfos says that there's three potential reasons why oil in the lamp should be Muktza. Does anyone remember does anyone manage to chashbon out the three reasons in Tosfos that why the oil in the lamp should be Muktza? So either because it's a bossis to the flame, in other words, a flame is Muktza, and therefore the oil is a bossis for the flame. So that's a quick chazara on the idea of bossis. So first of all, why is a flame Muktza? Not entirely clear why a flame should be Muktza on Shabbos. After all, the flame is usable because that's light. Why should it be Muktza? So it could be it's Muktza because of the fear of extinguishing it, or it could be Muktza because it has no substance. There's nothing to the flame, and therefore objects aren't Muktza because they're muchan. A bowl, a cereal bowl, cutlery is not Muktza because it's prepared before Shabbos to be used. A flame is Muktza machmas kufay. There isn't a substance to the flame, and therefore it's Muktza. That's concept number one, and we'll have to explore that in more detail. Concept number two is the idea of bosses. The concept of bosses is when I have Muktza placed inside another object. So I have my cereal bowl again, which is my go-to example of something which isn't Muktza. But I empty my pockets before Shabbos, and I put all my coins and credit cards into the cereal bowl. So cereal bowl becomes Muktza. Why? Because the cereal bowl is toffel, is subservient, is serving the Muktza, and therefore it becomes a bosses. So the one possibility which Tosfos mentions, or one halacha which Tosfos mentions, is that the wick and the oil is a bossis to the flame, and therefore in the same way as the flame is Muktza, the wick and the oil is Muktza. That's one reason for Muktza over here. What other reasons for Muktza? It's Muktza and Mitzvah. So we're talking about oil which is set aside for lighting the house on Shabbos. Having the house lit on Shabbos is a mitzvah, and therefore because it's used for a mitzvah, that means I'm setting aside for the Muktza use, and therefore I'm not going to use it for anything else. And therefore it would be Muktza le mitzvah. And the third reason for it being Muktza, it's not called Muktza, sorry, the phraseology is different, but because Shemen Yechabe, in case you put it out. So you can't help yourself to the oil, because if you help yourself to the oil, you're diminishing the fuel in the lamp, and that's the melachot of mechaber. You're not allowed to extinguish fire on Shabbos, and therefore the oil is effectively set aside not to be taken out of the lamp, because if you were to take it out of the lamp, it would be mechaber, and therefore again it's Muktza. It's set aside not to be used, and therefore it would be Muktza. So that's point one in Tosfos. Says Tosfos. Second point he says is that even though Rabbi Shimon disagrees with other Muktzas, he agrees to the Muktza of Muktza Mitzosoi. Something set aside. Rabbi Shimon argues with the idea that just because something passively isn't prepared before Shabbos doesn't mean it should become Muktza, just because the default setting is not. Something like a hammer. Rabbi Shimon might argue, true, you normally use hammers for melachos, but a hammer is a keli. Kelim are there to serve us in whichever creative form we wish. So why should it be Muktza? But something which is Muktza Mitzosoi, that's a Muktza that even Rabbi Shimon is moida to. However, what is the nature of Muktza Mitzosoi? Only that you can't benefit from it, you can't use it, not that you can't move it. Why is that? Because moving the oil in no way contradicts the mitzvah. You can move the lamp around, and that shouldn't be a contradiction to the mitzvah. Using the oil would be a contradiction to the mitzvah because I'm using the oil rather than having it dedicated, set aside for the mitzvah. So Tosfos is medayik from the Mishnah, which says that you can't benefit from the oil, that evidently we're talking about a type of Muktza which only prohibits use, not movement. Where would we find such a type of mitzvah? He says this can only work in Rabbi Shimon, who doesn't hold there's the regular Muktza of bossis, and therefore the only Muktza that Rabbi Shimon holds of is Muktza lemitzvasei, and therefore Muktza lemitzvasei would prohibit use but not movement, and therefore that's the diuk in the Mishnah of or that you're not allowed to benefit from it. Which means to say, just reverting back to our Gemara on Daf Mem Daled, that our Gemara brings a brisa. It's not entirely clear in Daf Mem Daled why the Gemara is bringing this brisa, what the link is exactly between the brisa and the Mishnah. The Mishnah is talking about oil that's dripped out of a lamp. The brisa that the Gemara brings in this short two-line sugya that we're learning is talking about leftover oil, Mosar HaShemen SheBaNer, the leftover oil after the lamp has gone out. The Gemara, we'll have to work out what the Gemara is saying when it links the two. But the interesting thing is, even though the brisa in this short two-line Gemara brings two opinions, the Tanna Kamma and Rabbi Shimon, Tosfos is arguing that our Mishnah is going like Rabbi Shimon, and therefore he says that you can't benefit from the oil in the lamp because the oil in the lamp is hooked to the mitzvah, and all that means is you can't use the oil in the lamp, you can't benefit from it. But moving it around is no contradiction to the mitzvah, and therefore it would be a muktza with respect to use, but not with respect to movement. So that's Tosfos' second point. Tosfos' third point is that the muktza with respect to the fear that it might go out is the third point Tosfos makes is that the huktzah lemitzvosoi is only a muktza while the lamp is alight, but once the lamp goes out, that muktza doesn't apply. Because why was it muktza? So as not to contradict the mitzvah use of the lamp, which is that it should give light and you should benefit from it on Shabbos. Once the light has gone out, why shouldn't you be able to benefit from the oil? What would be the logic in not allowing you to benefit from the oil? The light's anyway gone out, the mitzvah is finished, and therefore that muktza wouldn't apply. So that's Tosfos' third point. Now, the final thing I want to say is it comes out that there is a paradox therefore here, which is that, let's just think this through. You have oil in a lamp. The oil in the lamp is muktza, because if I would help myself to that oil, besides the issa of just extinguishing lights on Shabbos, I also have a problem that it's hooked in the mitzvah, it's set aside for the mitzvah. But some oil has dripped out of this lamp. Will this oil ever be able to be used for burning? Not. I mean, I could put it back in the lamp at some other occasion. It's not going to be used for this Shabbos of burning because it's already dripped out of the lamp. So it's not used for a mitzvah. It can't be used for a mitzvah. It's separated from the lamp. And indeed, that's why there wouldn't be a problem with using it because of extinguishing the lamp. Again, the oil in the lamp is still in the lamp. Oil has dripped out of the lamp. The wick is no longer able to feed off that oil. Therefore, there's no problem of mechaber. I'm not extinguishing it. Nonetheless, Tosfos says that Rabbi Shimon holds it's hooks in the mitzvah. Why? Because it was set aside for the burning of the lamp. This is only when the lantern is alight. Now the lantern goes out, says Tosfos, I can use this oil that's dripped out of the lamp. So it's a little paradoxical and non-intuitive, this idea, because it anyway was detached from the lantern. Nonetheless, it's affected by the lantern going out. In physics and science, they'd be bothered by this thing. They'd call it, it's like, spooky action from the distance. There's no direct link. Oil has dripped out of a lamp. Let's give a scenario where it dripped very far. There wasn't, the bowl that was catching it, the lamp was sitting over here, the bowl that was catching it was down here. So it's a meter below the lamp. It's a meter apart from the lamp. Nonetheless, it remains muktza because it was oil that was in the lamp, and that oil was set aside to be burnt on Shabbos, to give light on Shabbos. The lamp now goes out, so the mitzvah's gone. There's nothing I can do. The lamp's gone out. Now the oil that drips into the bowl ceases to be muktza, even though it's already long detached from the lamp, because the whole oil, which was set aside to the mitzvah, ceases to be muktza, because now the lamp has gone out, and therefore the mitzvah is over. But this is what Tosfos says. This is Tosfos' view and the reading of the Mishnah, that the Mishnah says you can't benefit from lamp oil which drips out of the lamp. It's going according to Rabbi Shimon. It's only muktza with respect to use, not with respect to movement. And that Tosfos learns there's such a muktza. There is such a muktza with respect to one thing, not with respect to another thing. And this muktza ceases to exist once the lamp goes out, because the whole reason it was muktza was because it was set aside for the mitzvah. And now that the mitzvah is over, there's no reason for muktza. That's a summary of what we got in the Mishnah. I apologize if this is a little confusing. You will get there. Don't panic. Don't. Yeah. We've been on this for a long time, so it's just yeah.
Even though all of this oil has been made muktza, that he is going sort of the Balamor, that it's only there is Muktza the Masechet Shabbat.
I'm not going to bring in we're going to leave out the Balamor over here because Tosfos argues that everyone would agree with this in this case. Yeah.
But I'm just saying is
Yes.
that is implying Rabbi Shimon is not agreeing with the idea that Muktza.
So we're going to have to deal with that issue of why is it not Muktza? Why does it not remain Muktza after the mitzvah's passed? Tosfos sort of addresses the question. Sorry, yeah.
Oh, that's right. I mentioned but is Rabbi Shimon not hold a process? As the Tosfos mentions explicitly, you can't move the ner because the ner, the shemen, and the tzila is a basis to the shahevet.
Yeah. No, he does hold bosses. I saw you cringe as I said the word bosses, and it was a slip of the tongue. Sorry, I thought I backtracked on that. I said, yeah,
The question was more in shemen that drips out
is no longer bosses.
Why is that no longer bosses? If the oil in the ner is still bosses to shahevet, it's still connected to that in the sense that it was once a bosses to our also.
Yes.
Our also is still standing. So if we say for other things, if I have my book and my phone, for some reason the phone gets knocked off the book is still a bosses to our also.
So Rabbi Shimon holds of the principle of the concept of a bosses, but only where the relevant Muktza applies. And since he doesn't hold that there's a relevant Muktza here, other than the hook to the mitzvah, therefore the implication of bosses wouldn't make sense. It's not that Rabbi Shimon argues with the concept of bosses, it's that Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold that bosses is applicable in the circumstance.
So you are allowed to move a lit lamp according to him because the shahevet is not Muktza.
Correct. Yes. I believe that's correct. Let me check whether I'm right.
Not also told our element shouldn't be not the bosses. But also. So I thought I read that
Sorry, again, while it's a light, you can't do it because of the yes. Sorry, I've got myself confused. While it's a light, you can't do it because of the dinner bosses.
Right.
The next Mishnah says once it goes out, Rabbi Shimon explicitly says.
Why can you move the shemen stripped out of it? Sure, that's also still in some respects still a bosses because the thing that's making it.
So that's Rabbi Shimon who says that once the light is out, you're allowed to move the lantern. And as he holds that once it's detached, that Muktza ceases. Yes.
So even though the bosses still there, the other thing that's making the bosses.
Correct. The thing that has ceased to be a bosses, the Muktza wouldn't apply to. Yes.
At which point is it? The lamp is still lit, the oil is stripped out, ceases to be a bosses to the thing. Why does it cease to be a bosses? Because it's out.
Yes.
Even though the thing that was originally making it also is still there.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, exactly that. And that's why I printed the source of the next Mishnah, in which Rabbi Shimon distinguishes between when it's a light and when it's gone out. Correct. Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
I didn't realize this first time on rereading the Mishnah, it's clear that the subject is clear consistently. So when it says that in the menu, I mean, grammatically it says you can't.
That's interesting.
Not the Shemen. And everyone seems to suddenly go, well, actually, we changed subject in the middle of the Mishnah. But it is, I think, yeah, clear capital in that time, that's not clear or the but does that just because the Mishnah sometimes does it just reads smoother to say it like that, but it doesn't.
But I mean, there are two items mentioned that you're correct that the Mishnah switches its use of pronoun because the shaman is also labeled. The shaman, there's two named items: the kli and the shaman, and the it varies as to which of the preceding things it's mentioned on. So the Enus and Menu in Nosnua would be going thing, which is incorrect. Correct. So the Nosnua is going back to the original object, and then the Enus is going back to that. Yeah, that's how Tosfos reads it. Yeah, it's a difficult Tosfos, which is why I printed the mashal here, because basically what I've said to you is just the mashal. That's all I've said is it's otherwise it's almost unreadable Tosfos. Okay, so let's just summarize, because we got ourselves into a little tangle over here. So again, there's the oil that drips out of the lamp, says Tosfos, remains Muktza the whole time that the lamp is alight, because of Muktza Mitzosoi, which is a Muktza that Rabbi Zobin agrees to. Then there's a second reason why the oil is Muktza, which is because to remove the oil would be mechaber. The lamp, the keli now, is a bossis to this oil, which is Muktza, because I'm not allowed to remove it. And therefore I can't move the lantern because it's a bossis to the oil inside it. If you would argue on Rabbi Shimon, there would be an additional Muktza floating around here, which is the Muktza of the shalheves, which the oil and the lantern would act as a bossis towards. So just to summarize, we have, in Rabbi Shimon's universe, you have two Muktzas floating around. The oil is Muktza because you can't take the oil because it's mechaber, and therefore the lamp, the lantern, the keli, which is holding the oil, is a bossis to the oil, and that bossis Rabbi Shimon would agree with. But once the oil is detached from it, there's no mechaber is no longer relevant. You're no longer extinguishing the oil by helping yourself to the oil, and therefore that would disappear. But Muktza and Sosa would remain. Whereas in the Cholkim and Rabbi Yehuda, there's an additional bossis over here, which is Muktza because of the shalheves, and the whole thing, the oil and the wick and the lamp would be a bossis to the flame, to the shalheves. Okay, so Rabbi Shimon agrees that a lamp, while it's alight, is a Muktza because of bossis, but by that he means a bossis because of mechaber, because if you help yourself to the oil, you're extinguishing the lamp. That's the summary of the Mishnah that we have earlier. I hope I haven't left everyone confused. I hope I'm clear on this now. Can I urge everyone to use Sunday morning before Shiur to please do Chazorah on the Mishnah and the Tosfos? There's no shortcut here. We'll get to these eventually, but and our focus in Mitzvah Hashem then on Sunday is we're going to run through this again just to check we're all clear, and then we're going to try and translate this back across to how this affects the leftover oil that hasn't been used, and that short price that we have in our figure. Okay, so we'll stop here for today, and Hashem resume next week.
Sure.
Thank you.